In episode 9 of Life is Best, we tackle some of the objections that people raise on that argument. These are objections about the baby. Scott Klusendorf, we shot the show right here in this studio, but we didn't stay here. We actually took his arguments out to the street. Do they work there?
Objection number 2. The unborn is only a potential human.
It's only a potential human being. Abortion kills a potential human being.
Okay. Tell me what you mean by potential human being.
Well, a human being is a person that's alive, and a child that isn't born isn't alive yet. It could be alive, but it could not be alive.
Does the unborn, I'll use the word fetus so as not to prejudice the conversation.
Okay.
Does the fetus have its own DNA, its own blood type?
Yes.
Okay. And is it growing?
Yes.
Okay. So it's alive in some sense of the word, you would agree. Because dead things don't grow
Right.
in that sense. Okay. So if it comes from human parents, what other thing could it possibly be but human? In other words, how do two human parents create offspring that isn't human but later becomes so?
But it might not become so.
Meaning?
It could die.
Yes, yeah, it could. But a 2-year-old could die too, but we don't think it's not a human, though it dies earlier. It dies sooner rather than later, but that doesn't lead us to believe it's any less human than the one that lives to be 100. Could the fetus feel something the mother doesn't?
No.
Like say the fetus has an internal, just to give you an exact example, there are children in the womb with herniated diaphragms, and the mother doesn't have that feature, but the unborn does. And so they'll remove the child, do the surgery, put the child back in the womb where it will be born later.
Oh, goodness.
So here's an interesting thought experiment. Does that child in that situation go from being non-human while it's in the mother's womb, briefly to being human while it's outside while the surgery is being done, and then go back to being non-human when it's placed back in the uterus?
It's human the whole time, but it's not an individual human.
Okay. If the unborn, though, has its own DNA, its own blood type, separate from the mother, and you're right, it relies on the mother, but relying on the mother, being housed in the mother, doesn't make it the mother any more than you being in your garage makes you part of the house. Would you agree with that?
Well, I can survive without the house.
What if we have a case where the fetus can survive without the mother?
I guess in a context where more harm is done by being pregnant or having a baby, then it would be unethical to keep the pregnancy, right? That's how ethics works?
I think you're onto something. For example, I think we would agree on this. Ectopic pregnancy. The embryo implants in the inner wall of the fallopian tube instead of the uterine wall. If you don't end the pregnancy, the mother's going to die.
Right.
That tube is going to rupture, and you lose both the unborn and the mother. So the greatest good I can do in that case, if I'm a physician, is save one life rather than lose two. But in the case of abortion, it's not merely that the death of the unborn is foreseen, the death of the unborn is intended. And it seems to me those two situations wouldn't be identical.
I think I mostly agree with you. I think in a lot of cases, the real ethical issue isn't with whether it's right or wrong to keep a baby. I think the real ethical issue is that is there enough support and services for mothers and for children?
Very important concern. Suppose you and I are part of a culture that has no support services for 2-year-olds, and orphans are thus declared to have no right to life because there just isn't social support for them. Would that be a good society?
Good has a lot of value judgment in it.
Well, yeah, I'm asking you to make a value judgment. Would we consider that an evil society that killed 2-year-olds just because others didn't step up to care for them?
I don't think it's good to let 2-year-olds die, but there are reasons that people do things that aren't good.
What I'm getting at is, if there's a culture, God forbid, if there's a culture that says you can kill 2-year-olds because others won't provide services for them, is that a flaw in the 2-year-old or in those who ought to be doing the caring?
It's it's a social practice. It's the society as a whole.
Would you call
has
that
reached
wrong?
That point.
That the 2-year-olds are killed simply because people don't want to step up?
Is it because they don't want to or because they can't?
Let's say they don't want to.
No, they don't combine it. That's pretty bad.
Yeah. So, last question to try to make this point. If the unborn are human, like that 2-year-old, should they be killed for lack of social services any more than we'd kill a 2-year-old for lack of social services? If the unborn are
No,
human.
they shouldn't be killed for lack of social services.
That's because they are whole, innocent human beings. If you would like to learn how to defend the life position and see it actually done in practice, Life is Best. You can learn more at lifeisbest.tv.